the benefits for the pandemic. And now that that's over, I'm working on this reCAPTCHA feature for the EBT states. So recently what has happened is another company has developed a mobile app for card users to access their account for EBT. And this has allowed a lot of robots to enter into these accounts, which has now compromised their account basically. And so we had to implement reCAPTCHA into our system. And reCAPTCHA is basically when you log into a site and it's like, oh, click the screen where there's a bus in it, right? So, yeah, so we've had to implement that, and we're working on going into production right now, for Arkansas. And then once that's done, then we'll start with the other 22 states.
Lost the connection, but I think you're back now. Okay. No, you're great. So, I've heard some folks mention languages they're using, Java, JavaScript. What languages are folks' teams using? Maybe somebody I haven't heard from yet.
So yeah, I don't know if you said team. I couldn't hear if you said that word or not. But I am working primarily as a freelancer and entrepreneur at this point. So I am not connected to a bigger team. I certainly build some relationships, but most of what I build is in React. So from that standpoint, we're using React as a front end, and then Node and just basic Mongo on the back end. From an entrepreneurial standpoint, looking at exploring further into AWS. So I'm kind of in the beginning stages of getting that certification, and also trying to pursue a client for Salesforce. So I'm kind of doing some certifications as we go. Okay.
Why is the AWS cert appealing?
It's so useful in so many different areas, and eventually I might settle down and actually get a job instead of just being a freelancer. and I freelance in like 3 things, and development's one of them. But from that standpoint, I feel like that's a useful credential. I see it required in a lot of areas. I also feel like the support for it's pretty massive, and so that gives me some opportunities and I see the same value in Salesforce. Obviously, very different set of tools, but so kind of just really exploring the waters there.
Okay. Charlie, what kind of frameworks are you using?
Okay. Well, the branch of DHS that I work with is USCIS, so they handle all of the immigration services for the US. So there's like between 40 to 50 apps, and there's maybe 10 that are Cold Fusion, and the rest are Ruby. So I don't think any of them really do any NoSQL. Most is in Postgres. There's some React. Some use Node. There's a couple serverless apps. But as some, and pretty much everything uses JavaScript, and most of them use React. So it's and it's all on AWS. So it's a lot of cloud support.
Okay, last but not least, Stephanie, just very briefly, languages, frameworks, tell me about your tools and stack.
So in my internship, we used J2EE, which is Java framework. Also, the latest app that I was working on, we used Angular and then a Spring Boot backend. As far as databases goes, I'm pretty much just experienced with MySQL. We use the MariaDB, but they're pretty much the same thing. When you go to connect it, you use the same drivers as MySQL. So, that's pretty much my tech stack. Java, J2EE, Spring Boot. I'm diving into the actual core Spring framework. And then Angular. I have some knowledge of React, but I've not built anything or worked with it hands on. That's my stack pretty much. Okay.
So I want to talk broadly about apps and different use cases for data. So I heard a broad range of use cases or specific databases we're using. So some MySQL, I think I heard Mongo, Cassandra. What are the kinds of apps that you're working on, and what is the data that you need in order to build those applications? Sai, let's start with you.
So we are actually applications means we are actually building microservices.
Okay.
So we actually for our project we are actually building like 3 microservices, and we are actually connecting with other microservices using Kafka. And in one of the microservices we are using the NoSQL database, that is Cassandra. Mm-hmm. So we are actually we are actually updating the database by getting the information from Kafka, which is actually getting invoked by another microservices service. Mm-hmm. And then we are storing those data in our Cassandra database. And then when we get the data from the merchant, right, when you swipe the credit card, mm-hmm. So that data we are actually comparing. We are actually calling the database and then doing the reconciliation whether all the data is matches or not. So in this way, we are actually making use of the Cassandra database in our project.
Okay, so why Cassandra? I mean, what do you need to do? What are you doing with the data? What do you need it to do?
Cassandra is basically NoSQL. Mainly, we won't be worrying about writing a large amount of queries. So Spring Boot takes care of that, like updating the database and creating new schemas, and also Spring will be taking care of that. So mainly, we are actually NoSQL database. We won't be writing many queries, and of course the performance will also be more because if you are using SQL database, you will be having a lot of joins, and you would be writing thousands of queries, and also it would be like large amount of lines with more joins and all.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what are the outcomes that you need from this? And like, why did you choose Cassandra with Kafka?
Oh yeah, Cassandra with Kafka. So we are actually connecting to the merchant. We would be sending some merchant would be sending some data. So they are actually configuring with Kafka. So we would be consumer in one of our microservices. We would be the consumer. Mm-hmm. So we would be getting the data from them, and we are actually storing it in a JSON format. And then from one of our microservices, we would be publishing the same data to the database using the same Apache Kafka. And we have a consumer from the other side in other microservices. So that would be consuming. And it's actually, Kafka is actually has a dynamic, it supports dynamic programming, and it's reactive. So we will also be able to retry a large number of times, and there is also no data loss, even if it is, if there is any data loss, we would be able to get notified. And also, if the service is not available, it would be Spring has actually this feature. It will has the feature of retrying, so it will be trying like n number of retries, however we configure, and then if the service is up, it will be get connected, and it will be
the data. Just in the interest of time, I'm gonna move to someone else because I want to hear a couple different use cases here. So, sure. Other folks that are using data, what are you using it for? What do you need it to do? I think I heard somebody say Mongo. Stephanie, why don't you go ahead?
So, in my current position, my title is paralegal, but the type of work that we do is a bit technical when it comes to the data. When a company has a data breach, we actually go through all their files and things like that, and let them know what has been exposed. So we could have millions of entities and records. So we use a MySQL database. We have those there's stored procedures, triggers, all that good stuff to help us go ahead and run through those initial queries and things like that to get everything cleaned up, because there's a first pass, a second pass, and in first pass they just kind of go through and pull out all the information, whether it's for the same person or not. That's how you end up with millions and millions of entities, because say a hospital, they would have records of each individual visit a person has. But the actual client, they don't need every single record. They just need the one person. And so, we use MySQL database to run those queries,